Hi, this is Chris Harris, and you are watching the Letterman Podcast.
La, la, la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. As I try and get a rid of, look at the extra light. That's sunlight. That's actual sunlight. You think it's a dark and dingy dungeon in here, and in many respects it is. But sunlight does come in. I'm like a prisoner that moves with the sunlight, trying to get. Oh, just please let the sunlight, just a few minutes of it. I don't even know why I started it this way. You know what? I'm going to start this podcast the way that I end a lot of them. This is why we do the show. The conversation I have with Chris DeLuca today, writer, been in television forever, worked for SNL. He was at SNL Page, so he's in that lineage. Conan worked for, a variety of other projects as well, but then also Kilborn and Craig Ferguson. And I mean, this guy has been around for a while. Guy was actually writing jokes for Craig Kilborn while he was working for Conan O'Brien. How crazy is that? We get into it. He was working for Conan. He was there the night that Dave came back and guested on Conan Late Night with Conan O'Brien for the first time. Some say that is one of the things that turned a corner for that franchise and for Conan. He was there for that. He's actually the guy that walked David Letterman up. Crazy life experiences that Chris DeLuca has had. Also has a podcast right now that is absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, a genius premise. It's called Talking Trump, the American Emperor Aftershow. And the premise of the podcast is that basically some of the things that are going down to my good friends, brothers and sisters south of the Canadian border is actually a show. And they talk about it kind of like Talking Dead or Talking Bad or some of these shows. It is a really clever premise, and I highly recommend it. Talking Trump, the American Emperor Aftershow, available on your favorite podcast platform. And YouTube for that matter as well. But Chris DeLuca has given time. He's got a lot of tangential connections to the Letterman world. And just hearing him talking about his time at 30 Rock and telling some of the stories that he told, it just really brings a lot of richness to this thing that folks like myself and other people who love to talk and pontificate about comedy, specifically late night, specifically these genres, these hosts, these productions that we love so much. This is a phenomenal example of that. This is why we do the show. You know what? I'm going to stop here with that. I hope that you enjoy the conversation that I had, even a fraction as much. If you enjoy this conversation, even a fraction of how much I enjoyed having it with Chris DeLuca, you're actually going to enjoy this episode, and it won't be just killing time. Please, without further ado, enjoy our conversation today on the Letterman Podcast with Chris DeLuca. Chris, I am so stoked that you've taken time to come here today. I want to talk about your podcast that you're doing right now, but we'll get to that. We're going to get to the after show. We're going to get, it's such a genius. The premise of your podcast is amazing. Okay. Worked at Conan, worked at Kilborn, worked at Ferguson. Good Lord. You've had your experience. You've put in your time in late night, figuratively, as a genre and as a show.
Well, I wasn't there from the beginning in late night, but I'm certainly there as it comes crumbling down at the end. So
yeah, no kidding. Boy, have we seen some changes in this genre that we love so much over the years. I just thank you so much for taking time to come on the Letterman Podcast. I'm
such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. It's going to be a great show. It's going to be a great conversation. It's funny, when I reached out to you, it's as a result of your name has actually come up a couple of times on this show. We most recently had Ben Zelavansky on, and you hired him for his internship absolutely. At Conan.
I'm glad my name is coming up under the premise of someone like Ben, and not because this is a podcast about people who owe money to credit cards.
That's the other show. And it's good to know that we can cross-pollinate both shows. Yeah, no, and I mean, you worked with a lot of folks. There's a lot of tangential connections to you in the Letterman universe, but at the end of the day, you also worked for Late Night with Conan O'Brien, the heir to the franchise that really blew the doors open for there to be other talk shows that could compete and have their own life cycle, because it really didn't happen. I mean, you had the Tonight Show, of course, with Johnny with the stranglehold, and you had people come along. Cavett, of course, was able to put in, his 2 cents into the late night mythos. But really, at the end of the day, there weren't a lot of shows. Late Night with David Letterman does its thing. They take their dog and pony show across the street to CBS, and it's like, well, we want to keep this thing going, so we're going to hire this comedy writer named Conan O'Brien. And
Well,
at what point did you jump on the train?
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, I don't know if this is gonna, I certainly didn't know this then, but when Letterman, first of all, when Letterman was doing his NBC show, I kind of was going through. I guess I first discovered it when I was in high school,
Yep.
and I've always been, a comedy. This is a phrase that's overused, but I've always been like a super comedy nerd, but also, like almost a little bit of a comedy snob in the sense that that was a huge, part of my identity when I was a kid. And I watched Letterman every single day. I would tape it on one of those old VCRs that had the freaking channel changers, like the physical channel
the
changer.
dial on the VCR.
Dial.
We had one too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I remember for a while when VCRs were just coming out, man, and my mom rented one because they were constantly like moving, up in technology. It looked like a big tape recorder. You would literally press play, and anyway, I would set the tape to tape Letterman every single night, and when I got home from school, I would immediately watch it, and I mean. It was everything. I loved that show so much. Not only did I love like I didn't even know. I was like, what is going on here? I loved the way he would kind of come out, just the purposeful, the way that they would put their logo on those, in their bumpers, on a do not walk sign, or on a hot dog stand that late night, it was the picture was taken with like very little, very little light in it. It wasn't, purposely. I loved everything about it. I loved how they had that opening announcement, and then they zoomed in on that window in 30 Rock that made it look like that was the window.
The one place something's going on at New York at that time. Yep.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then just the comedy bits and Chris Elliott and the extras, and then also, just I took his cadence upon myself, just like things that he would say would he did a bit a long time ago. I'll always remember, but he was doing like all these records that these celebrities put out, like that should never have been put out. One of them was Leonard Nimoy. He did a musical album, but he would call him Leonard Nimoy, which was not the way you pronounce his name. But it used just the fact that he would say that was supplied the punchline. He's like, and this one by Leonard Nimoy. I was in on it for 110%. He played the Shatner albums. That's a dog barking. I don't know if you can hear it.
No, dogs add to the demo. This is good. Now we've got dogs in the show. This is great.
So Letterman was amazing. And then I'll tell you one more quick thing before you
No, you tell me anything you want. This is jazz. Let's just have some fun. This is great.
Yeah, it also formed the stand-up comedians that he would book and bring on the show.
Yes,
that's also was a big entry point for me in comedy, because before they were super famous, he would have Dennis Miller on. He would have, I believe, and I'm almost positive, and I'm going to say this, I believe that Gary Shandling did stand up on the show.
Absolutely.
I believe that Seinfeld definitely did. Leno himself, he was hilarious on that show. I used to like when Leno, he was on like twice a month, I think.
Yep.
I would love to watch the Leno episodes. Leno would do panel, but really it was just stand up on the set. And then, other guys that were, George Miller was on all the time, and then Dave's friends. But
I was going to say, it's the combination of the cutting edge, which is great, the guys and gals who can't get onto Carson, and there's a few people who were tweeners. They could do both shows. Jerry Seinfeld probably being the most famous of them, but there's only a few that Don Giller and I were actually going through this a few months ago as to how many comedians actually got to do both shows. And it's a small number comparatively. And so what you're talking about, I love, because there's an appreciation for the cutting edge that can't get on Carson, but then you've got Mort Saul or
Yeah.
and then his friends, of course, Tom Dreesen and Jeff Altman, both have been guests on this show, like
Right,
his
that's great.
friends, yeah, absolutely. And us who are in our formative years are now getting this crazy mashup of the old school show business that Dave loved and would have conversations with some of these older, people or whatever, but then also the cutting edge. And it's a really cool juxtaposition, like, having Hal Gurney as his director who worked for Parr,
Yeah.
but then you have,
That's
you
so
know,
true. There was such a rich, like you felt it, even though you didn't know it at the time. There was like, and Letterman, if you read about him, obviously, I'm sure you have.
yeah,
He was very much, he had respect for for the tradition, of what broadcasters do,
yes.
and clearly that came through. When I just will come back, I don't want to jump around too much, but like
Jump around all you like, Chris. I'm just
when I
having
was
fun. This is
working
great.
when I was working for Conan for many years on the set, I don't know if you saw this on camera, certainly not all the time, but Conan himself had pictures. So here's Conan's desk.
Yep.
Here's the Eisenhower mug. Where's his guest sit on
Yep.
on a wall you couldn't really see all the time. He had headshots of Johnny Carson, Jack Parr, Letterman, and I
Mm-hmm.
think Steve Allen, or they always, and that was in Studio 6A. They always, there was always this homage. And then the guys who worked the cameras, some of those guys were left over from Letterman's
Absolutely.
reign. So like,
Yep.
they had seen it all, and the sound guys, the camera dudes who worked in the set, and some of the stagehands had been there, from back when Letterman was doing it.
So where'd you grow up?
Well, oof. I don't like to answer this question publicly but I'll share it with you. I did grow up in Staten Island, New York. Uh, I have a love-hate relationship with that island,
So does
mostly
Colin
hate.
Jost, so does Pete Davidson. But boy, is it
Yeah,
fun
I
to
mean,
hear the punchlines these days about Staten Island. It's becoming infamous in a different way, just like all of the other boroughs, which is great. You grew up in Staten Island, so
I know
you worship this
Colin had
stuff.
a much better experience, I think, than I did. So mine is a little more aligned with Pete, But yeah, Staten Island is where I grew up, and definitely has put I believe that the center of gravity in all the universe is underneath Staten Island. That is why, this is a land that's built on a giant garbage, pit.
It's a
So,
vortex of
yeah,
garbage and
there's a lot of weird energy there. Let's just put it that way.
so you're a comedy nerd growing up, a super nerd, like you love this stuff. Like I'm the same way, by the way. Like I mean, uh, who I envy, and it's not because of his career right now. I envy Judd Apatow. And it's because
Oh,
back
yeah.
then, he's working working. He's got a racket as a high school reporter, and he uses that to springboard his way to all these conversations with people who end up becoming giants in the
Yeah.
land of comedy. And I identify with that guy like crazy. Boy, did he ever know where the puck was going back then, and he just
Yeah. Well, he's from
jumped
Long
into it.
Island.
That's right,
Long
exactly.
Island, which is I wouldn't say Long Island is similar to Staten Island. I would say that they are related on the weird metaphoric plane of existence. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a scientist. I don't know the exact relationship, but there's definitely, when something happens in Long Island, a worse version of it happens in Staten Island.
Well, we got to get the anthropology department of
Yeah.
every
They may not know this for centuries, but there's definitely a weird connection there.
So that being said, I imagine, because I'm a Western Canada guy, and the allure of New York has called to me since a young boy, and this stuff. It just felt like the world and what was really going on that mattered was happening at 30 Rock. And I mean, I can imagine you're growing up in Staten Island, you're feeling this way. I can imagine there must have been times where it's like, I'm going to Manhattan, I'm going in front of that building, I'm going to see it, and then you end up becoming a page there. I want to know the connection as to how that happened. How did you worm your way in there?
Yeah.
And did that place, and does it still have kind of that majesty, that magnetic pull, that I think it does?
Well, you're absolutely right. Like there was a mythology about that building, especially when I was younger.
Yep.
I don't, there was absolutely a mythology about the building. Being from New York, well, at least I would, we would journey to go see the tree, you know, once a year.
Yep.
And obviously that's like tourist central. But
Yeah.
we would do the Saks Fifth Avenue and the tree. There was always a majestic, element to that building
Yeah.
for sure.
For
Walking into
locals
that
and tourists
building,
alike, everybody kind of felt it. It was a
oh yeah,
communal thing for people from near and far.
walking into that building absolutely, especially when I was younger, was like a special event. Sometimes if I would happen, you weren't in the city, when I was in high school, I wasn't in the city every day, but when you would make a point of going in there. And for me, for sure, my brain would go into like dream mode and I would just be like, I want to be a part of something that's going on in this building. It was
Yeah.
so cool. And this is also, it's a little bit different now because like now they have like this big NBC store and it's like it's such a tourist trap now. But
Yep.
back then it was so weird. I'm telling you, dude, this wasn't that long ago. You would go into the ground floor level. Now there's like a J. Crew and some NBC store, but there used to be
Yeah.
like this borderline shitty diner that occupied the first floor. And this is probably
Yep.
some of the most expensive real estate, in New York.
Yep.
Imagine what the rent was. And I think it wasn't called Blake's Diner, but it was something, there was a Blake's Diner
It's
there,
come up
but
on the show before, and I forget the
yeah,
name of it because I'm
it was a
daft. But
shitty,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the interior of that diner was like this pink, weird, 80s or late 80s like design. And you could sit in there and have a fucking I'm sorry, it's gonna curse.
No, no,
You
no.
could
Let's
sit in there
curse.
and,
Let's do it.
yeah. You could have like a scrambled egg omelet or something, and have a coffee like served in a mug like this. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, it was weird, dude. And then underneath there was all these stores there, and it wasn't like, now it's like Starbucks and all these corporate
Yeah.
places, but it was like some mom and pop like coffee joint, or like a guy who made, falafels or whatever. So it was a very different vibe. But yes, there was a majesty to that building. Walking in there, I constantly was like, this, I want to be a part of something. I was a huge fan of SNL growing up.
Absolutely.
My dad, I remember like my dad used to let me watch, when I was way young, he used to let me watch SNL up until Update, and then I had to go to bed. So
Perfect.
like, I kind of grew up doing that, and
Yep.
yeah, and then when I went to college in the Bronx at the College of Mount St. Vincent, which is right by Manhattan College, it's right on 242. If you take the 1 and the 9 all the way up there,
Yep.
I was able to get an internship at SNL, and I was the only person from my college to get that internship at that point. And I was just like, I couldn't believe, like back in those days, I sang in a college band, had like long hair, and
Nice. What
yeah,
was
I
the
went
band
past.
name?
It was called The Influence.
That's
Because I guess
fantastic.
we
It's just
didn't,
pretentious enough.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
just
We didn't
pretentious enough for a
influence
college band.
anyone. Yeah. But before I started the internship, like I cut my hair, I got a haircut. I went, I bought, I remember I bought like, I had to buy like clothes that were like, cool enough to like at least make me look, not look like I was like a homeless person, walking around those. But
You took
going
this
to
shit
SNL,
seriously, though. You took this shit seriously.
yeah,
Like,
I
okay,
was like
no, this
super
is,
nervous.
yeah, 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 yeah. There is no more apathetic college student at this point. This is like, oh shit, I'm going for my dream here.
I couldn't believe it, dude. I
Yeah,
couldn't believe I was
yeah,
going on that 17th floor,
yeah,
and I remember too, like first of all, I remember the guys that I was working for, my supervisors there, they were, I mostly kept my mouth shut as much as possible,
sure.
but they were very, looking back, they were very kind, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I
Yep.
was just walking around up there, just, and I was working in the research department on Mondays and Saturdays and
Oh,
Fridays, which meant that back in those days, they needed an exterior of an airport, to start off a sketch. So they would send me to a video store, and I would have to rent like, 14 movies that I thought would have an exterior, the exterior of an airport, and
yep.
bring them in there. And they would have to go through and mark off, this is how this sketch at the airport's going to start. A plane's going to land. Here's the footage, and then they go to the sketch. So I did that for photos and I did that for video, working in this department with these two. Well, I'll just say, like, Karen Nathanson was my boss, and she was so nice. And then Steve, and then like one of my heroes, even though I haven't talked to this guy in forever, and I don't even know where he's at, but this guy, Steve Corrin, was my other boss,
Yep.
and he couldn't have been. That guy was so, what a mensch he was. He was just like very cool, and I caught him at the right time in his life because he had a very big interest. Obviously, he had an interest in comedy, and he was like writing things on getting on the show while I was
Yep.
kind of there. And I just kind of like sat back and just kept my mouth shut, never bothered him. And if he needed something, I jumped up and did it. But he was kind enough to actually, after I got out of school, which was like a year later, I
Yep.
wrote him, and he was kind enough to write a letter or forward a letter on my behalf to the Page program, because he was a page also.
Yep.
Just such a cool guy. By the way, incredibly funny. My entire ill-informed career was based on him because he was a page, and I believe he kind of worked his way up to the research job, but he was a writer, and he was writing these great jokes for Update. And I think he was, again, I'm going to talk out of school here because I don't
No,
know
no.
exactly, but I think he was submitting jokes to Dennis Miller and to Kevin Nealon, getting stuff on. And this never happens. I mean, I thought it happened all the time, but it very rarely happens. He actually ended up getting promoted eventually to be a writer on the show. And he
Wow.
was the guy who wrote, among other things, he wrote the Legs Up sketches with Molly Shannon and Phil Hartman, and
Yep.
he did a litany of sketches. I'm forgetting some of them, but then of course he wrote Bruce Almighty, and he wrote, he's written films, and I don't know
Yep.
where now he's probably, hopefully he's on some yacht somewhere enjoying life. But he wrote a letter for me to get to be a page. So I got an interview through that, and then like from there, you basically, back in those days it was a little, I don't know what it's like now, but you went on 3 or 4 interviews to get that job. And it
Absolutely.
was
Yep.
oh my God, it was such a great job because you're sitting there, you're in the, now I'm in the building,
Hmm.
and it's like, now I'm walking. I remember I said this thing in the interview, in the group interview. I was like, CBS has a page program, but no one goes to that building for tours because they don't care. They care about this building, you know. And
Yes.
I was in the building, and and now you're giving tours, but more than that, like, you're exposed to everything, and also you're in the building, you're working as a page with other people like you, who are, they all dream about you. You're getting the best of college people, just out of college age people, who are ambitious, who are smart, who are hustling. And it's like going to college again, except there's no, tests. So it's
Yep.
really like just the good parts of college. And
Yep.
I enjoyed my time as a page. I worked there for back in those days, you're only there allowed to work a year.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna
man,
say they had very tight. Well, and it's funny because we've talked a little bit about the Page program because there's a gal by the name of Janice Panino who ended up doing running the HR for Worldwide Pants right up to the end,
okay.
and she used to be in charge of the Page program for NBC, and she started working for Stern, and all that, and then she ended up running that program. And I mean, you talk about a program with majesty. We just actually had a guy on, same as John Moran. John was at he was a page, and then he became a utility, worked for Late Show for the whole run. But I think he's in his 70s now, 60, late 60s, early 70s. And he talked about how he went to the 80th anniversary
Yeah.
page party.
I'm
And
still
I mean,
friends with I'm still friends with many. As a matter of fact, I'm friends with many people who I
yep,
paged with,
it's a
either
fraternity.
during my time and then slightly after. Being a page is definitely something that you connect to. I meet people in my professional life now who were pages years after I was, and you go, oh, you were a page. You kind of look out for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great. And then I'll say this real quick: like, when you're a page, you're very resourceful, and I'll tell you some fun stories. But one of them is
Please.
that we, again, like I was saying, was going to college, except you didn't have any classes or any tests to study for. So after work, you just kind of go out, but you had no money because you're all broke. We're all living in,
Yeah.
New York City.
Yep.
So I shout out to anybody who was a page with me who might be listening. We would go after work. This is so funny. We'd go to 40. So we're working at 30 Rock at 50th and 6th Avenue. You
Yep.
go down to 48th Street, which is like, if you've ever been around there, like 49th and 50th is beautiful and majestic. It's all, Art Deco. 48th Street is like Calcutta. It's like open air markets and everything. So I would take the pages. We would go to this place called Pronto Pizza, and only it was the worst pizza in the world, but only because you could buy bottled beer in there that was put on ice for like $2.50. They would
Oh, there
sell
we
like a
go.
Corona. So we
Yep.
would go there. We would basically just, it was this horrible, like lit with like a, what do you call the fluorescent lighting above you. The tables were like, gross, but you're drinking beer for like $2.50, because if you go to a bar, it's gonna be like $7. You don't have any
Yeah.
money. So like you're just dropping down beers, and I'm buying, first round's on me because I'm just dropping a 10 and buying 5. I'm gonna get the beer bought back when it's like expensive. And you're there at Pronto Pizza drinking a couple of beers because doing your pregame. And the place, we always say, they would close, and as they closed, they would clean the area. They would break out this giant bleach bucket with this old mop and just start like wiping the floor. So we were like, oh, they're breaking out the bleach. It's time to go. So everybody, all these young people would get in, get on the street, and we'd figure out where we were going next.
Were you
But
still wearing your blue blazers?
that's funny too. We had to wear those horrible blue blazers. No, I kept that shit in our locker. We had lockers and everything,
Yeah. Yep. Well, and it's funny because I love that you made this distinction, Chris. I really do. Yeah, CBS had the broadcast center. Yes, they had a page program. And yes, these people worked with Cronkite. Amazing. But you don't see it on 30 Rock, where they actually have a
Yeah.
character with the blazer. You don't see Cronkite going out and talking to the page outside of the studio the way you did for late night.
Yeah.
Like there is
Cronkite's
some.
up and said, Kennedy was just shot. Can I get 2 coffees? I gotta go break this to America. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So it has its own.
Flash.
But
Yeah, the coffee
but
over here, please.
or the man on the moon. And it's this is the stuff that guys of. I'm a 76 baby. Are you got to be close to that, right?
Yeah,
You
in
got to
that
be.
area, yes.
We're in that area. Okay. So yeah, you and I have it seared in our brain. Dave going out and talking to that, or SNL or whatever. Like it's seared in our brain. There's majesty to it. There's something there. And you got to actually experience it, and you are grateful enough and present to know, holy smokes, this is something that was hardwired into me from the dream come true perspective. And then you actually got to live it. And it feels like during the time you were actually present and knew it, which is also something that doesn't necessarily stick. This is one of those things sometimes years later you can look back on it going, wait a second, I actually kind of manifested that maybe or whatever, but it feels like you were present and you knew what you had.
I've been very fortunate in one thing in my career, which is like in such a horrendously stagnant area at the moment.
Tough for creatives right now.
I was very fortunate because I was around a lot of cool things that were happening, and I did understand what was happening. I'll tell you this quick story. When I was at Conan, this is a true story, 100%. This is crazy. So I lived in Weehawken, New Jersey, which is very close. It's right above Hoboken, and it was very affordable. Like if I paid like, I had an apartment with a couple of college buddies, and I think I paid like $550 for my share of it. I had a room,
Yep.
and everybody I was living with, we all worked in TV or in media.
Yep.
So my roommate, who's still a friend of mine to this day, one of my roommates, he worked at New York One, and he was working overnights, and he was in the world of news. And anyway, so this is an absolutely true story. Conan used to do that especially back when I was like a page and I was like a receptionist. Conan used to do these very involved post-show bits. And one time they were taping this, like what was like a Dallas type of you know, drama that Conan and Andy starred in. That was the premise of it. And they would bring in people to they would bring in these, I'm going to say, C-list celebrities to kind of have cameos in it all the time.
Yep.
And the talent department would book them, and they would come in and they would perform their role, and they would go.
The Abe Pagodas of the world.
Ava Godas of the world. Yeah. One time, one time for some reason, I was at my 6A desk. It's a true fucking story. And I think it was like after the show, or, no, anyway, Mickey Rooney was
Oh my
present
God.
on the sixth. Like for some reason, Mickey Rooney was on our sixth floor, and he was there all day, all day. So he was there to tape something with Conan, but something happened, and his handler, which was his son, just had him in an office all day long. So Mickey Rooney kind of would come out of his office because he was a creature of show business.
Yep.
And at this point, I don't know how old he was. I'm going to say he was definitely late in life. Like
he's at the point where Dana Carvey's doing imitations of him on Saturday Night Live. I was the biggest star in the world.
Yeah,
whoa,
I mean, he's definitely in his 80s,
absolutely.
late 80s.
Yeah.
I think he lived it. I think it was a few years before he died. Anyway, he kind of came in, and he was like this man. It was amazing. Like he was everything you would think. Like it was like a weird, small version, a terrible version of My Favorite Year. Like he was just he was sitting with me at the 6A desk, and he would pick up the phone. He'd be like, Mickey Rooney here, or whatever, and he was just like acting insane. And his handler, who later, by the way, was accused of elder abuse, just leave him there, and he took off. So I'm sitting there babysitting Mickey Rooney all day fucking long. So finally, and there's like crazy, he's picking up the phone. He's like, "What's this for?" He's like, "Put that down." Basically saying, "Mickey Rooney, can you please behave yourself?" And people are, the stage managers are walking in and out. They're looking. They don't want to be anywhere near me because they don't want to deal with Mickey Rooney. Anyway, so the day finally ends. I go home. I think I went out and got hammered. I go home, and my roommate, who worked at New York One, he was working the late shifts, and he came home, and he was just like, "You'll never fucking believe what happened today." I was like, "What happened?" And he was like, "We had interview segments, and fucking at like 8 o'clock or 8:30 at night, Mickey Rooney comes in, and he's there all night." I was like, "Are you kidding me? We just had to deal with Mickey Rooney all day too." So what are the odds that two people who lived in the same apartment in Weehawken had to spend between them 12 to 18 hours with Mickey Rooney in the same? It was insane. And that's like, I was just like, wow, this is crazy.
That's fantastic. And I want to mine this a little bit more, because that the years that you were at SNL, or the year that you were at SNL and at Page, they say that you're the fraternity at SNL that attaches to you the most deeply is the one that you had when you were in high school. So for me, Phil Hartman, I worship Phil Hartman. I love him so much. But the Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Kevin Nealon, John Lovitz, all those guys, and then we got to see the evolution, like where kind of Mike Myers showed up, and then you had Sandler and Spade and Farley and Schneider and all these guys show up, and you almost had my years almost basically had two casts. Those were my years. That's the time that you're there. Yeah. You're there for some iconic moments. Like, word, you got to see some crazy stuff there.
I was so stupid. I didn't know, I literally got in the building, and I was like, I didn't know what, I had to learn literally by my eyes how these things worked and what my job was. I didn't know what to do. So a lot of times I was just kind of sitting, waiting and watching to see if anybody needed me or whatever. But on Wednesday nights, I would be assigned to work with the script department, and that was the big read-through day. So we'd get in early. I was constantly just taking scripts down to the repo room, coming back up with them, and then at the end of that day, and I was so poor as a college student, they would do their read-through, and then the script department would get to order dinner. And if I hung out long enough, they would order me food. So I was like, that was what I was going to eat that night. So I would have this tiny little, literally a chair that I was allowed to sit in, that it was almost like an airplane chair. I could, that was my space. I couldn't occupy any other space there I walked around and sat on a couch, like they're like, who is this guy?
Yep.
Get the fuck out of this couch. I couldn't,
Yep.
so I would have just this space to sit in, and I would get my so they would order food and they'd be like, what would you like? And I would say, give me this chili burger deluxe, because I was just going to eat that. That's what I was going to eat the whole day. So
Yep.
I would be like, oh, going to town on this thing. I remember sitting in the chair, and the chair was positioned directly in front of Mike Myers' office. So Mike
Fantastic.
Myers was in there, and he was wearing like a hockey jersey.
Yep.
And I was so happy to take this burger in a big tin thing and just hold it on my lap and eat. And I was eating like just ravenously hungry. I remember looking up, and Mike Myers is in his office across the hall with the door open, and he looks at me, and I'm just like, I got probably have chili covered in my entire, like a baby covered in my face with chili, and he's like staring at me, and he slowly gets up, and I'm like, fuck, this is like my, and he just comes and shuts his door, so he's like, watch me eat. I was like, great, this is terrific.
But again, okay, Mike Myers, guess what? You were there during Wayne's World. Like there are times with SNL has had ebbs and flows and things like that. At this point here, half the reoccurring characters are getting movies made about them, that sort of a thing. Were there any moments during that time, other than the chili burger, which sounds delicious at this point? Were there any times that are seared in where you're like, wow, I got to see that musical guest, that I get to be this.
Oh yeah, I was there for the Nirvana performance.
Oh my God,
That was
yeah.
amazing. I was there for,
It sure
I was
was.
there for, it was, and again, I was so stupid. Like, I was there on a Saturday and I didn't know where to go. I was like, what do I do? So I'm kind of like, hey, do you need anything? No. And then I'm kind of like hiding, so I was there for the band when they did The Wait on the show. With I think Chevy Chase was hosting.
Yeah.
So I was in the green room area watching this performance of the band, and then Chevy Chase came out.
Wow.
And guest musician. That was phenomenal. I always admired. So you were talking about cast. I was lucky.
Yeah.
Like I admired the first. Bill Murray and Chevy
Yep.
Chase and Aykroyd, and I read all those books. I read the
Yep.
Live from Saturday Night Live book and the Wired by Bob Woodward. I read all those books, and for a
Yep.
long time I was like, I was enamored of John Belushi. Back in those days when nobody really talks about him anymore. And I would go to I had all those Lemmings albums, and I was doing stand up at the time, and I would do
Yep.
open mics and perform at something called the Village Gate Theater, which is now a CVS. And there's a big plaque in it, but that's where those guys kind of came up in New York. It was this beautiful, cool theater with 3 different levels. And back in those days, Comedy Central was just starting off, and they would run run
Yep.
this program called Stand Up, and they would just show clips. Basically, it looked like it was taped on somebody's phone, but there were no phones back then. They just
Yep.
run clip after clip, and so many of them were at the Village Gate Theater. That's actually the first place I ever did stand up, was
Oh
on
my
that
God, that's
Springer
amazing.
show. Yeah. So anyway, I yeah. So you were talking about cast. So yeah, I always loved Bill Murray, everything Bill Murray did, and he was one of my favorites. And then every the Martin Short cast with Billy Crystal, even though they were for a year, I watched that religiously.
Yep.
And then when I was working as an intern, Rob Schneider was there, and I remember like we would sit in that large bullpen area sometimes, and if a writer came in or if a cast member came in, you would kind of have to sit towards the side or whatever. But I was
Mm-hmm.
there for many cool conversations. Al Franken and Snyder
Oh
was
God.
writing there, and Snyder was there, and I remember Sandler was around. Sandler was very cool, and even though he was just friendly, he would make he would say hi, and
Mm-hmm.
he was friendly with the people in the corner that I sat with, Steve and Karen, and then Chris Rock was like very young, and he was
Yep.
there, and then uh there was there was just that was that cast. But then the cast that I really was attached to was when I was a page, because they were making a transition to the Will
Yep.
Ferrell, Darrell Hammond cast that kind of came in subsequent to the Phil Hartman and the Dana Carvey. Well, they had both left, but
I always thought Chris
that cast.
Parnell took over for Phil Hartman in some ways. I always thought
Yeah.
he was my guy. He's kind of became my Phil Hartman in my mind. I like that cast too. And then of course our boy Norm Macdonald.
Oh, of
I
course,
mean,
yeah.
you must have crazy Norm Macdonald memories because of that, but also because of Conan, of course. I
I
mean, back
worship
there.
Norm. Norm was so one of the things I did when I was a page was by that time I had wanted to be a writer when I was an intern, but I didn't, I was just doing stupid shit at college. I was just doing stand up, and doing stand up at bars that had stand up contests and stuff, and
Yeah.
losing
Yeah.
to the RA on my floor. It was humiliating. I was like, fucking guys, I'm funny. Uh, anyway, so by the time I was a page, like I definitely knew I wanted to be a writer, and I was like, I had been working in comedy. By the way, I was working in comedy in New York City
Yep.
with a lot of people who would go on to work for Letterman. I was in a sketch group with the Stengel brothers,
Oh,
working with those guys, and we were in this phenomenally unbelievable sketch group because so many people from the sketch group went on to do cool things in TV. So I was working with the Stengel brothers, who obviously went on to be the head writers at Letterman. Doug Abels was in that group. He was an
wow.
Emmy award-winning SNL writer, who, among other things, who else was it? Chris Regan, multiple Emmy award winner from The Daily Show, and we worked with
Yep.
Family Guy. Almost everybody, not almost everybody, but so many people from that group went on to stuff. And
What was the name of the group?
it was called Uncle Zeno's Chuckle Patch. So maybe that's why we weren't so discovered. But Andy Daly was an actor in it, and Beth Littleford was an actor in it. And, it was just a very formative experience. We used to do shows at West Beth Theater. So I was always writing sketches.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm a writer, blah, blah, blah. I was making my way through that arena. This is before UCB hit, Chicago City Limits was like the big thing.
Yes.
When I got to SNL as a page, I was ready to go. I was like, I'm absolutely 100% in. I'm gonna be Steve Corrin. I'm gonna go.
Yep.
I'm gonna be a page. I'm gonna
Yep.
submit to Update, and then I'm gonna submit to a show, and I'm gonna be a writer, just like him, a hero.
A little delusional, but great. That delusion
absolutely.
is what got Dave, guest spotting on the Tonight Show. Like that delusion is what makes these things happen many times. It's literally looking up at the ball of lightning going, I wonder, can I grab the ball of lightning? And then suddenly you get the superpowers. I gotta ask you this one question before you move to Conan, though. I gotta get to this because you mentioned Sandler, and one of the things about that cast is many of them are on record as card-carrying worshipers of what David Letterman and company did, and they would talk about how they would go to the floor and they would like sit and they would just kind of be on Letterman's floor, just kind of looking around to see what might happen. There's an amazing picture of Conan O'Brien at Dave's desk, while he's a staff writer for SNL. There's times where he would go, and the lore is Conan would actually go and write sketches at Dave's desk for SNL, which is to me that just it's beyond charming. It's just delightful to me. Did you have any time or inclination or even like the confidence to go and try anything like that at that point, or did you really try and stay in your lane because you didn't want to mess it up?
I have to say this though, especially when I was a page at SNL. Excuse me. I have to say this. I would work at the desk and do everything I possibly could to not fuck up.
Yeah.
I would be like, fastidious about everything that I did. Like if somebody asked for something, I would jump up and do it. And then I got an opportunity. Somebody said to me, why don't you go upstairs after you're done here and help work on Update, which was really just kind of stacking newspapers and making sure that newspapers were in piles, essentially. And then they said, well, by the way, if you ever want to submit jokes to Update, you can. So I was like, what? So I started to submit jokes to Update when Norm was there. And I have to say a couple of things. There were a lot of people, and I'm certainly happy to name them, who were unbelievably gracious to me, like doing that. Like Frank Sebastiano, who was a legendary writer at Update for Norm, and Ross Abrash were two of them. I couldn't effing believe it. Like I would submit a joke or a couple of jokes, and I would just like be sweating this. Like you would not, like my whole life was about jokes. And by the way, when you're starting to write those Update jokes, they're like 8 lines long, and you have, that's way too fucking, they have to be like I'm constantly
The
trying to like
economy of
edit
words
them.
is
Yeah,
extremely important.
I'm
Yep.
teaching myself how to write these jokes, spending like all day doing it. So I would like submit jokes, and I remember one time I had submitted jokes, I didn't get anything on, and Ross. So I was walking in the hallway, and Ross was like, "Hey, I saw those jokes that you gave. Keep it up." Just little things like that.
Mm.
And then Frank would say something nice, and it was just like I couldn't believe how gracious they were. And to this day, I ended up working with Ross like years later.
Yep.
Um, but also other people were incredibly gracious. Like Daryl Hammond was so gracious to me, like so nice. I used to go up, and when I would work for the update thing, I would go up and work with him on update pieces where he would just, in his mind, he would be like, I want to do Lee. I remember, this is a true story. I want to do Lee J. Cobb as a an update feature. I was like, okay. And then he would do this voice. It was just the fact that whatever he would say was so fucking funny. I'd be crying. Be like, he did this whole thing about when I was a kid, they put me in the hole, and he would just like do this, like, and I would be writing with him. He was just, he was so positive and so nice. I remember one day he came up to me and he was like, he knew I wanted to be a writer, and he was like, well, let me see some of your sketches. And I was
Yep.
like, this is it. I'm going to be a writer next week. So I gave him the three best sketches. These are three of the best sketches I've ever done in my life. And they had been performed and everything. And I was like, that's it. I'm cool. And Daryl took them and he brought them upstairs. And then like a couple of days later, he came down and he was like, he was giving me notes on the
Yep.
sketches. And I was like, what? In my mind, I was like, what do you give? These sketches are perfect. They've been proved. They've been performed. And then he was like, he stopped. He saw this look on my face and he's like, this isn't the best you're ever going to do, right? Because then just like forget it. Like this is, so I was like, oh,
There's
I,
perspective there.
one thing I learned from that experience that really hold as a tenant is talented people are never intimidated by other talented people. They welcome talented people and they look at them as if like I can get something from your talent. Your talent can enhance me, and I'm going to enhance your talent. So I had like Jim
Yep.
Brewer coming up to me and Daryl, they adding stuff to my sketches that like made them better,
Yep.
And I remember I was able to submit a couple of sketches through Daryl to the show. Excuse me, that never got on, but that was like such a thrill. And I wrote this one sketch about this guy who has these two people held captive, but he's like super stupid. So like he's about to kill them. He's like the serial killer's about to kill them and stab them. And then the people are like, they're trying to like, and they go ring ring from their mouth. They make it sound like, and he's like, the phone. And he wants, throughout my career, I've had like, Andy Daly perform that character of the stupid captor. And then I've had like, guys who are super successful. I've had Julius Sharp perform it. And then at one point I had Jim Carrey read it in a read through. And so it's like the guys who have read
Holy
this part
smokes.
in my career have run the gamut from like me when it was writing it to Julius Sharp played the character, Andy Daly played the character. I think Alan Arkin's son played the character.
Wow.
And then Jim Carrey read the character at a read through at SNL. So I was like, well, this sketch has served me well.
Yeah, and that's the stuff, that's the kind of stuff that I remember. Like you love those little moments that end up being, trails, breadcrumb trails that you're going to follow towards the thing that you want to do. At what point did you
I
go ahead?
remember when I sold my first. I'm sorry I remember when I
No,
sold my first
love it.
joke to Norm. I was watching at home and he did my joke. I was so crazy excited that I jumped up. I basically I took my girlfriend at the time to we went to a bar and we bought those little mini like this size bottles of champagne and we just drank. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was so happy.
That is exactly what I'm talking about. Like you, and all these years later, you being able to say Norm Macdonald read one of my jokes on, like, I get it. Like you say that to me and I'm just like, oh, I'd be drinking the champagne with you right now. Like that is
Yeah.
such a cool, it's such a cool thing. At what point did you transition from SNL to Conan? And there must have been a lot of familiarity, because I mean, again, you guys were all on one team. Again, that 30 Rock thing, even though, again, those who love Letterman, moved over to CBS and whatnot, but at the same time, there's still that magnetic pull. And I want to get to the night that Dave came back. I definitely want to talk to that. I literally was talking to Robert Morton about this yesterday. The night that Dave actually came back, and as far as I'm concerned, christened Conan. But you were there during were you there when the dark times were dark and then they got lighter? Were you there during that transition?
I was there towards the end of that. So I'm going to tell you this story.
The 13-week commitments, you were still there for that?
Well, towards the end, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Towards the very end of that. Because I did some PA work on Conan.
Yeah.
And that was like a scramble because those guys back. I remember it being a very weird environment when I was doing the PA stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was so fly by your seat, the seat of your pants thing. But when I was at SNL doing the page stuff, I made sure that I was just like as good as I possibly could be at the 8H desk. And then I became for the next season, I became like the key page upstairs. So I was in charge of like seating people and making sure that VIPs got where they needed to do. And I was working with somebody on the SNL staff who was super, super smart and incredibly organized. Her name was Ayala Cohen. And I was just, when she said to do something, I was like, I did it. She said jump. I was like, how high? She was like, that was her job, is to coordinate all that stuff. And she was like, very, very, savvy and smart. And I just did whatever she did. And it came time where they were going to hire a receptionist for the next season. And I believe I was going to get a chance to get that job, but I had to wait the whole summer to, and not work. So I took the Conan receptionist job because it was literally like 40 weeks out of the year as opposed to like, SNL, which was different, not that they ever offered me that receptionist job, but like, I believe I could have had a shot at that. And maybe it would have changed things. I don't know. But I worked at Conan, and that was different. When I went there, it was a different vibe. SNL obviously had been established. It was like, for lack of a better term, there was like, they never spared any expenses. They would like, you'd come in, they would have these famous Thursday night, writing sessions, and they would bring in food from these restaurants. It's like they make, you picture in your mind, they went out to KFC. No, they went out to the best restaurants in freaking New York City. And I would go up there on Thursday nights late after everybody had like basically went into their offices, and I would be eating scraps, but it would be like, from
good scraps,
Elaine's,
yes.
I'm like having the best food of my life. Anyway, and it was abundant too. But so what would you? I'm sorry, I divert.
No. Just the idea of going to Conan from SNL, and you went there. SNL did retool after when Norm's company came and whatnot. They had to kind of the ebbs and flows, right? But Conan was a completely different beast because he took over for David Letterman. He took over late night, and in my opinion, kept the spirit. If late night was a franchise that Dave built, the spirit of the show late night certainly transitioned over. The tone was different. The host was different. Of course it was different, but the tone was certainly, there was a through line.
I think that's a huge part of his legacy, is that he honored Letterman by doing that. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know. And I was spoiled because I worked for SNL at, my limited experience at the time. went from SNL to Conan. Absolutely, positively, Conan, even as a stupid, 20-something-year-old, I was able to see like the comedy and the signature of the show was absolutely such a priority to Conan and his close staff. That was without question. I've worked at number of shows. Like 20 shows, who were pale imitations of that, where the commitment to that tone and to that signature just never measured up to what Conan did. It was like everything revolved around that. Like, they had to be fun, they were funny in that way. And if you read about this, and if you look at the documentaries and, you hear the podcast interviews, Conan was like, okay, Dave did found humor. We're not doing found humor because that's Dave's thing. So right away, Dave did found humor. Like, he revolutionized found. I don't even know, did it even exist before? I'm sure it did, but
but not
Dave
like that.
It was like that was amazing. The shit that he did.
Absolutely.
And Conan was like, we're not doing found humor. We're going to do written sketch type shit, weird shit like that.
But zany, still with the zany
and through line. And it was 100% authentic to him.
Yes.
And that is what I think when people look back at his reign, it more, that'll be a huge part of his legacy, and deservedly so. He was, again, take it for what this is worth, but I always found that he was an incredibly smart editor. Like on the floor, he would edit things like in real time. Maybe I was just impressed because his brain is like 3 times the size of mine. But he would just
Everyone
like,
talks about how smart Conan is.
yeah, he
Everyone
was
that
like
I've
an
talked to. Yep.
incredible editor. Boom,
Yep.
boom, boom, boom. He would make, in rehearsals. Rehearsals were, I'm going to say this, and maybe I'm not remembering 100%. Rehearsals were generally fun and funny.
Yeah.
Um, when I've worked on shows, sometimes rehearsals are very unpleasant,
Yeah.
but rehearsals were fun with him. And here's the thing too, like, and this is something I tried to bring on, and I think I do with every other job I've ever had in my life, was the guys who worked on that show on Conan, the writers, they were all kind of like my heroes. Like they
Yeah.
were so funny and cool and cool to me that they hardly ever did anyone ever, almost without exception, was dealing with the writers always a pleasure. Like they would come in, they would make a joke. I looked up to those guys and still do in many cases,
Mm.
and have they shaped the way that I approach the people that I work with.
Yep.
Because I saw them do that. So it was more than that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting to, when you're trying to get those jobs, you're fighting to be in that environment. You're not fighting to be an asshole to people. Like
No.
go work in fucking insurance. You know what I mean? Like I would work, some of the recent jobs I would have, I'm always, you're trying to be fun, have fun all the time, and
I'm a believer, Chris, that collaboration kicks the shit out of competition. That's always been a thing to me. And not just because competition, don't get me wrong, I'm a sports fan and I love hard fought competition, but I also love team sports and I love watching my team come together and collaborate to compete. And to me, there is no feeling like when you have the synergy of, so I'm working on a project right now, and there's a group of people that are there that all have this reverence for show business at this time of show business, and it's sort of Dave related, and there's no better feeling than when we crack a code of some sort, whether it's a
yeah,
tagline here or just a little edit of the pitch deck here, or just a little, and you all feel the same thing. And it was
no,
so and
you're
so's idea, and you're celebrating this is so and so's idea, and and it's going to take us to that next level. It makes us feel that way. Collaboration, there's something about it, and when you have it in that creative spirit at the highest level, I mean, my God, what a
you're
feeling that is.
I couldn't agree with you anymore. That is something that I learned, and I took such pride and enjoy in. I was like, after I'd left Conan, and started to be a writer and a producer in the world of entertainment. I had the opportunity to be a head writer for a number of different like award shows, and the staff that I would bring in, I'm still to this day I talk about the people that I worked with and how we kind of worked together to build something. And I don't know if you want to hear, I feel like I'm just having diarrhea of the mouth right now, but like,
This is great.
there
That's
was
what a
just so many,
podcast
like,
is.
I remember one time, I was working with, when I was writing for the video game awards at Spike TV, I brought in Kurt Metzger, who was a insane person, but a tremendous writer. John Gabris, who is also insane and hilarious. Just literally, his presence is funny. Dom Dierkes was one of my writers. He was gone on to do great things, and he's just like, talk about a crazy comedy nerd. He's like, the depths of his mind are insane. Nate Bergazzi was my fucking writer.
Oh my
So I had all
God.
these guys in one room, and I remember we were working.
Nate Bergazzi was a writer for you on the video. Was it the Video
Yeah,
Game
that was
Awards,
his
or was it
first
for a
job.
different? That was for that.
Video
Oh
Game
man,
Awards.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and God, he's a funny guy. And
I just saw him and
what a
Dave.
great
I
guy.
just saw Dave interview him in LA a couple of months ago, and it was very interesting to see it. And actually, one of the premise of the back and forth interview, and they didn't. I can't believe they didn't record this thing, which makes it even more precious that I got to see it live. But as Dave and Nate were going back and forth, one of the things was Nate didn't quite make it onto Late Show, but he did make it onto Conan.
Uh-huh.
And so they actually showed a clip of him on Conan, and Dave, of course, takes the opportunity to say how much of an idiot he was that they didn't book him and all this sort of stuff. But I mean, you talk about a guy whose trajectory, and to realize the echoes of this thing, that at one point he's in a comedy, he's in a writer's room with you trying to come up with
Yeah.
jokes about, I don't know, Halo or something like that
Yeah,
at that
exactly.
point, you know?
He was even though he was like green at writing for TV, he was definitely he was so like, and Kurt brought him to me,
Yeah.
and Kurt is like the most insane, cynical comedy person, but he was like, this guy's, we're bringing him in. So I was like, of course, you know. And I remember like Kurt and I were working on this piece for Sam Jackson. We wanted to do, and this is back in the day. I was like, we were doing a piece about the lack of black characters in video games. And every time you see a black character, he usually plays as a thug, you know, in Vice City or whatever. And we're pitching this to Sam Jackson, who's the most intimidating person in the world. And he's on it.
Could be the blackest man on the planet. Could be.
And Kurt wrote this line that I'm so proud of to this day. We were talking about Sam Jackson was going to make classic video games black, and one of them was Frogger, and we changed the character from Frogger to Frogid Hamid, and it was like this Muslim Frogger character. And then the line that Kurt wrote for Sam was, "Now people cross the street to get away from him." And
Perfect.
Sam fucking no notes. He took it and he fucking nailed it. And I have it on my YouTube page. But like that was like our room coming together. And Julius Sharp was another writer for like a couple of years. And Kurt and him would write monologues, like warm up jokes. You know, basically the opening monologue for Sam. We would all write it, and Sam would do it. And Sam Jackson is a tremendous voice. Like literally, his cadence can do anything. So working and just to build on the collaboration thing is an enormous part of all this stuff. And it's the cream. It's what if you can get to a place where that's working, that's it. I mean, that's like the boss level, you know.
The boss level. That's a perfect analogy to use, especially considering the previous example. Ben, it's funny. Ben Zelavansky, who was on here, who just absolutely is so to this day grateful to you, and others have told me about that as well. You have obviously taken that spirit that was given to you, and it's so cool because there's so many stories of this. You have some stories of assholes at this point, to give color into this world of the people who work at these shows, but they're few and far between. They actually do add color to the story because most of the story is like Steve O'Donnell, the legendary Steve O'Donnell. I've had literally over a dozen people tell me, oh, if it wasn't for Steve O'Donnell just seeing me and saying, oh, and putting a hand out and pulling me up, I wouldn't be where I am. And he was exactly like that when I met him. And you obviously had that spirit from some of these people who were entrenched in these places that you wanted to be, that did the same thing to you, and you took that spirit and have done the same thing. Letterman's, the culture of his in his company, it's the same thing. That happened a lot. Ben said the same thing about you, and Ben, he talked about when he came into Conan, and it was when he came in, it was after the dark years. It was after the the storm had sort of passed, and now it's like, okay, we're going with this guy, and Tom Shells reversed his position and all that sort of stuff. And he's like, it was amazing, like, because he's working with this big crew of grateful people. Like, he's just like, the pressure is suddenly off a little bit. Can you talk to that a little bit? And I do want to talk about when Dave came back, because I believe if there was a keystone to that avalanche of that, I think Dave coming back might have been sort of the keystone to that. Dave christened you guys.
So three quick things about that.
Please.
I got my job as the receptionist at Conan. I had come from the 6A page desk, where I was just like, again, I was just doing everything I possibly could to make a positive impression.
Yep.
I was trying to be as dependable and just, you tell me once, respectable to every single person. And then I got myself lined up where there was an opening. So a few people helped me get in there. Kim Simon was one. She was the previous receptionist that moved on to a research position. And Mike Hammocky, who's a legendary figure, I call him the Hammer, but he was Hammy for everybody else. He was amazing. He was like the guy who was like my conduit up and down. So I when I got in there, I kind of entered at that point. And so the show, I came in really at the very tail end of that uncertainty. And I'll say this, like, the show may have been more certain when I physically started working there, but the remnants of the trauma that the staff had to go through were definitely still there. Like
Yeah.
I dealt with, and I'll say this, I don't know, this is like a weird thing to kind of say. Like, I think that like when I went in there, even though I
Yep.
was a fuck up and I was not a really good receptionist and I was a terrible research person, it might have been an unmitigated disaster. I might be the worst research person in the history of that show. I have to be. But when I was there, it was very traumatizing because there was a lot of darkness in the production area of the show. Not, I'm
Right.
not talking about the writers who probably, I'm not talking about them at all. They were always,
Yeah.
they had a creative job and it was, but on the production side of the people that I reported to, there was a lot of trauma there and there was a lot of darkness and it was a lot of like, you're on your own, I'm dropping you in this fucking
Mm,
water. And, I was clueless and they were not very, sympathetic to my position. Also, at the same time, I had to grow as a person to get in there. So I was bringing in
sure.
interns, and I was like, I felt bad about like asking interns to do stupid things, like send them down to these video houses. And I was like, okay, hey, can you please?
Yeah.
I had to learn the ropes myself. But
Yeah.
the I'll definitely say this though. The vibe of that survival vibe was still very much present, and I
Yep.
feel like I kind of came in, and that's when I'm going to say this, and people will probably laugh who worked on Conan, but like I feel like I began to turn the tide on that a little bit because the people that followed me, the people that I
Yeah.
helped get in there, whether it was hiring, Ben is a phenomenal dude and
Oh, I
is
love
super
that guy.
talented from the
Yep.
beginning. We
Yep.
were friends and are
Yep.
friends. Ben was like, but Ben's class of interns were like the first interns that I had, and I brought in, you know, I hired Jason Chalemi to be an intern, and we became friends. And I was friends. I shouldn't have been necessarily friends with these interns. But what was I know? I was just coming. I was almost an intern myself,
But like you said, though,
2
you're a
weeks
fresh
earlier.
arm. You're a fresh arm coming
Yeah.
into this team that's
So
played,
yeah.
15 games in a row, and suddenly you're coming in as a fresh arm to kind of help change the vibe as the vibe
And
has already started to change.
and they were doing things a certain way, and they weren't necessarily happy that my way was different. So it took a little bit of time to kind of get in there, and then people kind of left, and I kind of like, the people that came in for me were a little like Jason and Ben, and then the pages that followed me, Kim was the person who helped me get in there, and Hammocky helped me get in there. But then
Hmm.
we started to bring in like people like Christina Weldon and Sharon Hardy, and these were all people that were either interns or pages that came in. And I'm forgetting some, but like Nicole
Yeah.
Sabini came in and she replaced me. I think Ron Mata was. So the vibe and the energy kind of started to change, and it became the I'm sure it was traumatic to go to work every day and literally not know if you're going to be working next week, especially
Yep.
back in those days. Because
Yep.
like there was not the internet, there was no internet. It was literally, it was all analog. So like that, I think that traumatized a lot of people, especially in the lower level. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure the executives were okay and they were going to be fine eventually, but everybody
Sure.
else was hustling and it was like a real palatable feeling. So like for that to change and and again, when we worked on the ninth floor, that's where the offices were. The place was falling apart and it was never repaired. Like so, there's a remote that Conan did during the first strike where he's going around, he's showing the holes in the ceiling, and I think he shows like a couple of rat traps and like holes in the wall, and
Yeah.
that's what it looked like. Like nobody would come up and fix that stuff because they were like, these fucking guys aren't going to be here in 6 months. Fuck
Yep.
you. It wasn't until like after I left that they remodeled and basically put money into literally in the office. But the office, there would be like, someone would spill a pizza in the drink room, and that would even be there for a while. Uh, so and then there were papers stacked all over the place. It was not. It was like it looked like a moving company.
Yeah.
So, but
Did you
then,
ever see the pickle, by the way?
what do you mean?
The pickle? Okay, so there's a pickle a big stuffed pickle that has translated from Late Night with David Letterman. It was there at the very beginning, and it's still to this day in the writer's room of Seth Meyers' office. Did you ever see the big giant pickle?
I'm
Did you ever
sure I
see?
did. I
You
probably
probably
don't
did. You just
remember.
didn't
Yeah,
necessarily know
yeah,
the thing.
no.
What was your favorite part working for Conan?
Um, so I will say this just to tie up that little thing. I
Oh,
remember
sorry.
when the
I
show
apologize.
started.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
No, no,
stepped on
no,
that.
no. I remember when the show started to make the turn around the corner
Yes.
is because
Yes.
they used to have SNL does this too. They have pictures of like great guests and great moments they capture from these amazing professional photographers, and they put them up on the wall. Well, when
Yes.
I started at Conan, there were pictures of Conan at the desk with guests, and the guests were like either people like Dick Cavett, who was
Yeah.
not, an A-list guest at the time,
Mm-hmm.
or an SNL person who Conan was friends with. But
Mm-hmm.
when we got, I think it was Robin Williams was like the guest that kind of made us turn the corner,
Yeah.
because he was somebody who Conan didn't really have a relationship with, and we kind of got him on the show. Then you started to get guests, and those pictures on the wall that had Al, there was like two Al Roker pictures, or one picture with Conan and Dr. Joyce brothers, then it started to get replaced. It was like Conan and Robin Williams, Conan
Yeah.
and Tom Hanks, Conan and Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
Then you started to see like a transition to, okay, now the show is clearly um accepted, and now we're like, now we've kind of turned the corner because of the quality of guests that we're getting on the show. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like a way that we found out that you can kind of tell.
Which, by the way, is perfectly in line with the lineage of late night. You look at Dave's first couple years, and I mean, on the very first show, Mr. Wizard, and you look at late night with David Letterman's first few years, where that was so scathing towards show business in Hollywood, right? Many of the people that they would have on were far removed from that world, and you had more performance artists and things like that. But then you get to 85-ish, you're 3 or 4 years in, and every cool celebrity wants to come on the show at that point, because it had turned that corner. The exact same thing happened to Conan. The exact same thing. And
Dave's experience was a little bit different, because like Dave often had at least a visual, just on a telegenic element. He sometimes would have those conversations with guests that were not, simpatico. He had to
totally,
share conversations, and you
absolutely,
never kind of knew like when something was gonna, be a real tension-filled moment. And that
yeah,
kind of like was a good thing for because Conan's was a little bit different. He didn't really have a, disagreement with guests necessarily. He just kind of
no,
like would empower the guests to kind of take off, and the Norms, the Dana Carveys, that they would just kind of like own the segment and just kind of
yeah,
blow it up on their own.
yeah,
But
yeah. He'd wind them up and watch them and let them do their thing.
yeah,
Whereas Dave very rarely did that. But again, this is the part that we celebrate this one fact on this show a lot, and we can do the same thing with Conan in a different way. Dave, okay, he stand up, yeah, but it's a discipline he learned because it was a means to an end. He was a broadcaster. Conan, yeah, performer, legendary, in the hallways will do a show with a mug and a pencil and do something, he'll make up a show and whatnot. He is a performer, but he's not a performer. He's a writer, but then thrust into that chair, and so there's a little bit of the stranger in the strange land kind of a thing for both of these titans, where they kind of came at it from a different place. Whereas you've got other people like Leno, full on stand up, and now I'm going to do this job. And I think that there's a sensibility that's different in that regard. Conan the writer, Dave the broadcaster, and then they come in here to do this show. I think that has something to do with the alchemy of their success as well.
Yeah, 100%. And they have these prior, again, I was lucky. I got to see, Conan was, I didn't know it at the time, but Conan was extremely accessible too. Like I remember like every year he would invite the staff to his place for for Christmas drinks or something, and then I would go to Conan's apartment once a year,
Yep.
and they would make sure, I would get frisked before I got in there, but he would have people over for drinks, and you in his beautiful apartment. I remember he was living at 72nd Street at the time, and
Yeah.
I'm drinking a free beer in Conan's apartment, and he's walking around being social and shaking everyone's hand. I'm like, hello, Conan, you and I are friends. It was just like, you don't find that in other jobs. So that was like one of my
Yeah.
first jobs. So really, it was my first job. And I thought like, oh, this is probably something that happens all over. It doesn't ever, So he was accessible. I would be in an elevator with him. He would ask me questions. We weren't friends or anything, but like,
Sure.
I remember like talking to him. We used to play basketball. He tells this, or this story's been told a few times, but like people on Conan's staff would rent out Basketball City, and we would all kind of go down there and play basketball on Mondays because there was no show
Yep.
taping on Monday. And I would go and play, and sometimes it would be like a few people on a court, but at a time it grew into like 12 people on the court. We had like 5-on-5 full court games, and Conan would come. And I remember one day Conan was as soon as he got the ball, like if I was playing anywhere near him, I would like take 7 steps back. I'm not going to injure the freaking boss of the show. But some dude like I think it was a writer gave him an elbow to the face once, and his lip started to bleed. I was like, "What is going on here?" The whole game stopped, and there was a lot of shit we did as a staff. Oh, and you asked me like the best parts. There's not really one best part, but like I would say that the thing I took from the job most is like this idea of how to produce your own things as a writer, because they all did that. I didn't do that there, but I saw them do that. And then the other thing I would take was we did a lot of shit as a community team that I didn't realize, that makes that show definitely unique for sure. And one of the things that Bill Tull was a guy that everyone talks about. He was the prop master, and he's a legend. And he was as a man, he was like, he was very nice to me, and he was nice to the people that I worked with. He was nice to Jason. They had a great relationship, and Jason Chilemi. And Bill would bring out every once in a while, and now that I think about it, it probably was a system to this, but he would bring out this enormous cooler that was the size of a fucking car. It was huge. It was so long, and it would be filled with ice and beers. And it was like every so often, maybe every quarter, we would all have beers in the prop room. I'm talking the entire show, like the writers, Conan,
that's
the guests
great.
from that day. We would all just kind of drink beers. And when I was in my 20s, I was just like, yeah, I'll drink a freaking beer. Yeah, let's go. So I would be just drinking beers, and we'd be there, and people from SNL would kind of come down sometimes, or like we would like one time Bruce Springsteen was on the show, and he came in and he had a drink and everything. So like it was just that kind of a thing where they would just, even today you get a lot of like money counters, and your budgets are strict, and you don't have EPs like doing that. At Conan, maybe they would just say, okay, we're gonna do beers today or whatever, and it would just happen, and it was awesome. Those types of like moments. And I didn't know, again, at the time, I thought it was like something that happened all the time. But when I went to other jobs, I was like, yeah, no, let's do this. And they're like, huh, what? And then like the weird things that you would see that have always scarred me comedically, like Bill Tull, for example, they did this. The bits that I loved the most were the ones where they would say like, here's mascots for colleges that never made it. And it would be like from the University of Clemson or whatever. It's the pantomime horses riding real horses. So it's like Bill Tull dressed as a horse, and he's on an actual horse. Or like, they would bring in, this is another thing, like they would bring in a lot of actors, comedic actors from the community in New York, a lot of UCB people. And by the way, the UCB people themselves, before they got big, were always on the show. Like Amy Poehler used to do Andy's little sister. Amy Poehler was such a great, she was so good in that bit. And obviously she's a fucking comedy powerhouse. And
she's an alien. I swear to God, Amy Poehler's an alien. Like, geez, just the perfect comedy alien. Like I adore her.
She was such a nice person too. Like she was totally cool all the time. But she did Andy's little sister, and they crushed that. And those writers, like the Brian Stacks, all those writers were so good. They were like my hero, and they all kind of brought something different to the table. And I just kind of like, I take that. Even the segment producers like the Frank Smileys and the Dan Fergusons and those guys that kind of worked it there. I kind of take that experience with me everywhere. And even to this day, I will look back at something that was done at Conan as like the way that I communicate with my graphic designers in jobs that I have now is how I communicated to them, or how I learned to communicate to them when I was working at Conan. I worked closely with the graphic people for a while because I was the graphic coordinator, and I was terrible at it. But that was like and I suffered in that job in a sense, because I remember I lost my paycheck once, and I misplaced it. I was like, oh my God. And I went to the people in charge of the money, the unit managers, like, I lost my check. And they were like, don't worry, we'll print you another one. We'll void the other one, and we'll print you another one. So they got me another check, and and then I found that check like years later. It was like in my drawer somewhere. And I was making like, it was something like for a whole week's work of where I did like, 80 hours or 60 hours. I was making something like $232. I was like,
in New York City.
It's like, it was crazy. Well, I think one check was like $216. I was like, how the fuck did I make that money? I think I was getting paid $350 a week for a while.
Yeah.
But I was doing it, and I was doing a ton of stand-up, and I was doing stand-up with the writers. I would see them out doing stand-up. So it was like, it was interesting. So anyway, I'm taking up so much of your time with these bullshit stories, but
it's not this is why we do the show. Like, again, I love long form. I'm a fan of long form. Everyone who's giving me advice, helpful advice, by the way, and thank you for the people who are giving advice, telling me how to strategically whatever. I'm just enjoying the organic experience, and part of the reason why the organic experience is doing what it's doing is because it's long form versus what everybody wants now, which is the short form stuff. I'm going to get to some pants stuff, but it just feels like the right time to start talking about your podcast because it is a genius premise to me.
Well, that's very kind of you. I appreciate that.
When I saw, when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, this is great because I'm a Canadian, right? And so I have referred to lovingly the dumpster fire that is the polarization of my poor brothers and sisters to the south of what is going on over this last decade or so from a cultural but political, I think, is what's really driving it. The polarization is absolutely bonkers. And how many times have we up down there? I'm certain I know up here we're like, it is a reality show down south right now. It's a reality show of what's going on.
I know. I wish I could laugh in a way that doesn't have it, that doesn't drown in worry. But yes, 100%.
And so the idea of it being a reality show, and you decide to take that extra step and throw your creative muscle into it. Talking Trump, the American Emperor Aftershow, and with the premise that it is a reality show, and you're going to come in and do the Talking Dead thing or do the whatever, and it's going to be talking about the show, and that's the point of view you're coming from. And I heard it, I saw it, and I heard it. I'm like, that motherfucker is a genius. That is a very smart premise. Is that just you, or is it a collaboration that came up with this?
Well, first of all, such kind words. I really appreciate that. It's an idea that I had that I thought was going to be a segment on a show that I was working for at one point.
Okay.
And then I thought
it is a perfect late night bit, isn't it? Isn't that a perfect late night show bit? Yes, it is.
Yeah, but then I never got past like the initial pitch of it. But it always bothered me, that I wanted to do that because I'm going to use the word sick of, but it's a little dramatic. I'm a little sick of Trump is such a malignant force. I'm sick of this idea, though, of the comedy about him, of explaining a position and then, having a lecture part of it and then kind of coming in with a punchline.
Yeah, you shortcut that completely with this here, don't you?
So that is, look, there are incredibly talented people who do that, and they do that extremely well. And the Daily Show does it, and Seth Meyers does it, and everybody kind of does it. But this is I feel like there's a way, like our approach is like when you see a movie with your friends, or when you see let's say you go see a Marvel movie, or you go see some movie, and you talk about it afterwards. There's such an easy way, like when you're making fun of the movie, you're kind of like you're kind of doing it from a place of agreement. Like, that was outrageous. I can't believe Hugh Jackman, who's like 57, has to take his shirt off 100 times in the latest Deadpool movie. And then you talk about like how that was, oh, can you believe they did this? And it's even better when you see a crappy movie, back in the day where we would see a Steven Seagal movie, half the fun was like tearing it apart. You would watch it over and over again to see, you pull up in a car and behind it, you're supposed to be in New York City, and behind it would say like, welcome to Canada, all those things. So like, that's the approach that we kind of take to this. So it's like a prestige drama that we're seeing, and it takes away, like when Trump does something horrendous, like for example, fill in the blank, but like when he his stance on abortion or whatever, or without getting so political, let's just say like
he's eating the dogs and cats. He's eating the dogs, exactly. He's eating the cat.
So instead of having to present to you as an audience like why that's insane, when it's clearly insane, we just say like, we're just taking it at face value. We're saying, so why would a character say that? Well, clearly he's battling madness, and you're able to talk about what he's doing on its face and fill in the background to it, it just gives you it's just a new way to make fun of Trump, and not just Trump, but also the political cycle that we're in.
I was
Because
gonna say that it's
yeah.
because it's not purely like it. It feels like you guys will take a shot at anything that is insane out there. That is like,
Yeah.
wait a
And,
second, like
and
this
the
is
funnest
ridiculous that this is our reality.
The funnest part is if you believe that Trump would say that they're eating cats and dogs, you would also, in the context of a TV show, well, you'd also have to say, well, when they decided to go with that line, they turned down other lines. What were the other line? Oh, they said, white trash drinking from spittoons. Oh yeah, that Trump could have easily been on the stage saying that, but he chose to go with this line about eating cats. So like we've done, we like there, and then there's also things that happen in real life. Like when we were trying this idea out, we would talk about like plot lines that were abandoned. And I don't know if you remember this, but like when Trump was president the first time around, there was a report that he wanted to build a moat outside of on the border and fill it with alligators.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that would have been great TV. How come they never did that? Well, there was too much expense involved.
Yeah, the budget on that, we wanted to do it, but you couldn't CG the alligators right.
It's like the writers and the producers are, and then we do this backstory, this fictional backstory of the actor who plays Trump, and his name is Sir Lawrence Davies. He's a crazy British actor whose contemporaries are Sir Anthony Hopkins and Ian McKellen, and he came from this. He's just had this wild. He's like a combination of what's his name, the famous writer who. I'm blanking on his name. I'm seeing his face. He's like a Ernest Hemingway type, writer, who's just lived this wild and crazy, like a Peter O'Toole life where he just for years he just drank. He doesn't remember Oliver Reed, all these like legendary British actors. That's where the school that this guy came from. So he has he's insane, and playing the Trump character makes him insane. So our latest episode, we're talking about his upcoming contract is coming up, and he has all these demands, and the producers and the show writers made a point. They told everybody not to tell the Trump character, Lawrence Davies, that the Friends actors made $1 million per episode because he will be incensed. But it somehow got back to now he wants $1 billion per episode, and also the contract demands he wants the buffalo population of the United States to be restored to its original number pre-industrial. So we're having fun creating the story behind these actors that come on, and then I think our next goal is to bring in an actual person from the Trump orbit and talk to them like they're an actor. So I'm trying to get somebody in. Luckily for me, these people are like so hungry for like attention that I could probably get somebody in, but it would be like, Michael Cohen would come on.
I was gonna say Michael Cohen would be perfect for something like this. Oh my gosh.
I'm sitting here with Richard Greensbeth, who plays Michael Cohen on the show. Like, what? And all I need is like 6 minutes to talk to the guy. When you get your pages, is there anything that's left that shocks you? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So like, it's a lot of fun to do, and we're gonna do it until the election, once a week, and then we're gonna try to. I guess I don't think Trump's gonna go quietly if he loses, so we'll probably get to the end of the year.
Oh, there'll be aftershocks. I'm certain. Yeah. I'm certain there'll be aftershocks. So to me, like I look at a guy like Donald Trump, and to me he is literally a method actor. Like I see that, or a stand-up, or a combination of the two. Like to me, that guy is a lot smarter than that character passes himself off to be. To me, he's 100%. I want him to hear about this so badly, Chris. Like you have no idea how bad I want for you there to be some sort of Trump heard about this show, and because I think he would get. I think he would get it. Like I honestly
probably would. Yeah,
I think he would get it. I really, really do.
Or he's definitely insane enough to think that. Oh wait, is this a TV show that I'm on? He probably would think that. We do. We talk about his background as an actor and how he studied with the masters like Uta Hagen and Strasberg and Meisner, but he did it all literally at the same time. So all these guys are in the same room. Yelling at him to do different. That's so we have fun going into like how mad he is, like how insane he is, and then you see like the evidence whenever he's on TV. I have this clip I play where he's like, "I hate flies," and it's just like, okay, he's like Brian Cox in Succession, but like completely out of his mind, like insane.
Okay, so okay, you say who's the team?
So
Who's doing this?
when I worked at Kilborn, I shared an office with this very funny man named Ted Jessup, who I didn't know before I got to Kilborn. We became office mates and writing partners. And then Ted has gone on. He's written for Kilborn and Ferguson, and then he wrote for Family Guy for many years, and he wrote for Roseanne Barr. He's written for I'm forgetting. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of his credits, but he's one of the funniest people you'll ever in your life have a conversation with. He's just absolutely hilarious. And when I met him, we kind of became friends because we would share an office, but we would also like kind of watch, Law and Orders and NYPD Blues sometimes during the afternoon and he would just like improvise these hilarious, off the TV. He's just such a funny guy. Like he'll make you cry. I remember I went out to dinner with him and my wife and another friend, like another woman and him, and he just spent like 40 minutes at this beautiful dinner in Los Angeles at this beautiful restaurant. And he was just talking about how he wanted to order, it was an Italian restaurant, he wanted to order a fajita because when you get a fajita, you get so much attention because people see it and they hear it and it's like a big fucking, and he just spent like 40 minutes on ordering a fajita. And I was just like, oh my God. And people were like, my sides were hurting. He's just a very, very funny dude. And when he's on the show, I write an outline for the show of what we're going to cover. I don't think he even knows how to access a Google account. So he's just like riffing most of the time. Yeah. And he's just like, oh, and I'll bring up something like, oh yeah, Davies, as we know, studied in English. Oh, of course. And he's with, and he just have the ability to kind of like riff and make these stories up. And, he's just a very funny dude who thinks in a certain way. And he talks different than I do because he's much more eloquent in how he speaks. So he sounds like a critic, and he's just a very funny dude. So yeah, I'm very happy to do it with him, and we're having fun. It just it's cool, and we make sure that we get our premise, because the premise is hard to sell a little bit. So we make sure that we always kind of have to lay it out, so we make up some story that's like, kind of riffed off.
It's the Stan Lee thing about comic books, right? You would say this to people all the time. You got to remember, every comic book is somebody's first comic book. And so whether it's at the very beginning of a Batman where there's a one-page whatever, revenging justice on his parents being killed, Bruce Wayne is the Batman. You have to have a little bit of, especially with this premise. But that being said, this is why I want you to get an audience as fast as humanly possible, because if that's the case and you're able to go down this path with people accepting it and whatnot, I just feel like it could turn into something like I listening to it's just on the podcast platforms, right? It's just on Apple, Spotify.
It's on YouTube as well.
It is on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I accessed it through the podcast platforms, but I see animation that when you think about some of these some of the things that Colbert's doing with the animation stuff that they're doing over there, that kind of a thing. I see this being something that really, really, really has legs. Talking Trump, the American Emperor Aftershow.
Right. Thank you so much. And the American Emperor is the name of the prestige HBO drama that we're talking about. So that's the Sopranos, that's the Breaking Bad, that's the Succession show that, and we
this is Talking Dead of the American Emperor, the American Emperor. Yeah.
The weekly news cycle is that week's episode. So next week's episode, Trump is going to be whatever the fuck he's talking about now. He's that hurricane shit that he's doing, or it's just like it's fun. And then they bring in new characters. It's like, oh, we get a new character. So let's talk about this JD Vance character. What are they trying to do with that? He's different than Mike Pence. Oh yes, So we analyze it like that, and it's just a fun way. I think it's a little bit easier to digest way to make fun of Trump. And we made fun of Biden. We called him basically our take on him was just like, he's clearly, this man is a CGI invention. There's no way that a man could be this old. Humans live to 105 max. I have pictures of him like in the 1800s where he's an adult. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we just like, we find a take on somebody in the context of the show, and we have some fun with it. But thank you so much.
No, are you kidding me? No. And my mind's been spinning like ever since I've seen it. I mentioned Judd Apatow earlier. He just did a spot on Kimmel, and during the it was only a 1-segment deal, which is too bad to me. I love Judd. But he was talking about how like, and this is going to come back around to your show. He was talking about how Stormy Daniels was in the 40-Year-Old Virgin,
Oh, okay.
and also Knocked Up as well. But in the 40-Year-Old Virgin, she was like featured, and how lovely she is and nice and all this sort of stuff. And he told some anecdotes about, she talked about Trump back in the day, but way before any of this sort of stuff started. That to me is somebody who could guest on your show very, very, very easily, and I think that she would do it. So hopefully,
That's a
somehow,
great idea.
some way, yeah. I've had 4 or 5 of them about your show since, like, it's literally,
And by the
the
way,
premise is so beautiful.
Our mutual friend Joanna Jordan, if you're listening, I'm calling you soon to get some advice on how to bring one of these people in.
Isn't Joanna Jordan just amazing?
Yeah, when you and Ben were talking about her, I was like, oh, that's so great that she, and I forgot that she, she has this, she's blazed this incredible career, and I worked with her recently in a couple of shows, back when TV was an industry that people were hired on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing. Like, it is crazy, and that's another thing. It's like so many different, you cross paths with so many different people, and it always, and I've been fortunate. Maybe maybe it doesn't work this way with everybody, but so many people their experience have informed mine and made me smarter. I'm smarter for knowing all these people. I'm smarter for understanding why Joanna would pitch a certain guest, or why an EP would act a certain way, or what the interest is of this head writer and or this host.
Yep.
So it is a very interesting thing. I just wish that the industry was still alive.
Yeah, you know what? You're preaching to the choir on a whole bunch of levels there. For sure. I have literally created whatever it is that I've created by hanging my hat on the talent and generosity of others, and that's what I love about doing this show. I love that collaborative process, and I'm a nostalgic guy. Morty and I were talking about this yesterday, when I was asking about, hey, do you remember, were you there the night Conan came back, or Dave came back to Conan, and he made that crazy joke, how did you get this show? And Conan, like, he served up a volleyball, and you can tell it was not a segment producer volleyball. I swear to God, it wasn't. That's one of the questions that I get in my head, the nostalgic kick. Is there a chance that a segment producer helped set that moment up? I feel like it didn't. How did you get this show? It was a show writing contest. I came in third. It was the perfect response that there ever could have been.
And
Dave
that clip
loved
was
it.
Pulled and used on every clip package that we ever had. And
right,
when Dave came on the set that day, there was an electricity to it. I was told to, normally we get our guests from the main entrance of, and part of my job as a page was to go down and get the guests, and I have plenty of fun stories about doing that. But
sure.
Dave came in on 6th Avenue, which means you're walking basically the length of a city block to go get him. So, like, I didn't know he was coming. No one, and I was told, go get the guest, go get Dave. I was like, what? So I go down there, grab him, and Dave, like, normally I welcome the guests, and I give them like a 15-second preamble. Dave knew exactly the drill. So he was like, hey, he was super friendly, super cool. Didn't need me to tell him, if you need anything upstairs, all that stuff. He was just like, let's go. He shook my hand. He was cool in the elevator. He was wearing his khakis, wearing like that long sleeve t-shirt. I brought him into his room. I was like, if you need, he's like, thanks, Ben. I told he wasn't dismissive, but he was like, he didn't need to know that I could get him anything. He just knew, and I dropped him in there, and everybody in the hallway, it was electric, and then when he came out, it was electric, and it was like one of those great moments that, just had like a total energy to it. And you don't really, I can't remember the last time like you get those incredible moments like that. And, I met Letterman like for 15 seconds or whatever it was in that walk, and I was just like, wow, this is so cool. I can't believe it, and again, if he had been in any way like a jerk, I would have been like, oh, don't meet your heroes. But he was like so cool. He was just like 100% like totally cool. Like, he didn't have to be as, nice, and but he was, and it was just like I couldn't, and I was just like, afterwards I was like, well, I went home that day and I was just like, wow, man, that was pretty fucking awesome. And I worked at Conan, and a lot of the peers or colleagues that I work with it's about, there was another group of people that they went to MTV and they worked at TRL.
Yeah.
So there's a very
Yeah.
tight-knit group of people who worked at TRL, but I was working at Conan. So I would walk home to the Port Authority and pass the TRL studios all the time. And I would subsequently, when I worked at MTV afterwards, meet a lot of those guys, and they're very tight-knit, and I went to a wedding of a dude, and two of his men in his were in his groomsmen, their connection was from TRL. So like that was like another route to go. But I remember that day I was walking past and there was all these kids outside of the TRL studio, and I was just like walking around them saying, wow, I met Letterman and I was on the show today. Or like the night that Norm did that crazy thing about Carrot Top, I was just walking home, having experienced those moments, and even like funnier things where the writers would do like crazy bits in the audience, or like, McCann would come down as as Preparation H Raymond, or Tommy Balacha, who's like another fucking hilarious hero of mine, would be the gaseous wiener, or they would do the pimp bot, all that stuff was just like masturbating bear. That was just like, you talked about this in one of your podcasts, that idea of like being in the hallway and a guy dressed as a llama walks by you. That was a lot of shit like that happened. And that was the funnest times, because like I said, with that pantomime horse and a real horse thing, they would line people up. I remember one point, one of the weirdest things I've ever saw was they were doing the staring contest. That was some of my favorite bit, the Conan staring contest. And Chris Albers was a writer on the show, and they put him in a moon, a spaceman outfit, so he had a helmet on, like Neil, as a man on the moon type of thing.
Yeah.
So he would come out, and the idea is like Conan and Andy are having a staring contest, but Andy is seeing all these fucked up things behind Conan that Conan doesn't see, and it's supposed to distract him. And then the joke box in that, by the way, is you could do anything. That's
of course,
the writing technique of that. That
perfect
satellite TV could be anything. That's why those bits were so great. So anyway, so the astronaut comes out, he plants the American flag, the crowd goes, yay! And then Chris Albers was the writer who did this, takes the helmet off, and it's Hitler. And the audience goes, boo. It's like completely organic. The audience like cheers.
I remember the moment.
Boos Hitler.
I had forgotten the moment, and you just reminded me of the moment. And like, that is one thing that I loved about Conan. Like, I remember hanging out with my friends. We would watch Letterman and we would watch Conan. That was our thing back then, and I mean, we're early 20s. Like, I mean, I don't even know if we were early. It's 19 years old. And the first friend that gets an apartment, right? And you're always over there playing video games and stuff like that. Cause it's like, they've cracked the code of independence. Let's do this. And you watch, you watch Late Show, then you watch Late Night. And there's a bit going on. There's confusion on the stage, and then suddenly Mayor McCheese shows up and he walks in, and you're like, why for no reason whatsoever, no relation whatsoever. Just there's Mayor McCheese and he walks in, and you're just like, you want to be there. You want to be in the rooms creating that. You have done a phenomenal job today, Chris, talking about the spirit of that and the chemistry that builds exactly those moments that we're talking about here. This is a weird thing, because I have so much arcane knowledge in my head about all of the Worldwide Pants productions and all of those things. So this is where you're at now. Then you end up going to Late Show eventually. There's a bit of a break in between. From everything that I've heard. And now, don't get me wrong, Craig Ferguson is he might be my third all time. Like, the Late Show with Craig Ferguson, I have such a special place in my heart for that. My other golden age of watching these things is Late Show, Conan on TBS, Ferguson, because we have the DVR by this point, and now I'm able to watch all three of those, usually in the evening, because I'm West Coast. And so if I started at 9 o'clock, I could, with fast forward, I could watch all three of those shows. And there was a 2-year period where that habit was there. That being said, everything that I know about Late Show and the transition with Kilborn to Ferguson and all that sort of stuff, it wasn't the environment that you're talking about at Conan. And I'm being as respectful as humanly possible, because of course I worship at the ground at Worldwide Pants walks. But at the same time, it was a different deal. And I'm super curious the juxtaposition for you between the two careers, working for Late and then working for Conan.
Well, I had written, I was writing monologue jokes for Craig Kilborn while I was working at Conan as a researcher, and I was getting a lot on. And also, I had friends who were working at Kilborn who
Yep.
were probably helping me in that. Um, so I had this experience where I was like basically supplementing my income by selling jokes to Craig Kilborn, and I would like write these, and I would write, I mean, you're a faxer,
Yeah.
but then it's email at that time. So I was
Yep.
like getting stuff on like almost daily. And then I would like kind of take a twist and make a different type of joke, instead of a traditional news joke or traditional weekend update type joke, I would kind of say, now it's time for Craig to, blow your, Craig ruins your buzz. And then there would be an art card that comes up and Craig would be like, oh yeah, enjoying your marijuana there. Oh, who's behind you? Oh, a cop, and kind of like, he would do like these little vignettes within the news thing. So I kind of
Can I
started to
ask a
do
quick
more of
question about
those.
that? Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
Did you write in the Kilborn character voice?
Yeah.
Okay.
But at the time I didn't really know that so much. So
Oh, that's
that's
hilarious.
something like I
Yeah.
just kind of thought like he had a so Kilborn, here's the underreported story. Like Kilburn is a great guy. Like he's a
Yep.
great guy to work for, and
Yeah.
he's once you understand his entire presence, he's a pleasure. He's hilarious to be around because I don't want to say this, it's not like he's playing a character. It's just like that's the way he is. Like
I gotcha.
he is that kind of person. Like I'd be walking. I remember when I first started, like the second or third day, I was walking in the hallway, and I was kind of like had my head down, and Kilborn was coming up the hallway,
Yeah.
and I didn't see him. I was like looking down, and we almost bumped into each other. But he knew that I was a writer, and it was like my third day, and he just kind of looks up and he's like, hey, what's up, man? I guess it's like, and I was like, oh shit, this is my boss. But so I also have to say this that may be a little bit disappointing to you is that I don't have the same opinion of Ferguson.
Yeah.
Ferguson was not was not the experience was different,
Yeah.
and Ferguson was definitely it was a different experience. I'm saying
Now
the
you
word
were there in
different
the
a lot,
early
but
years though, right?
was there from the start with Ferguson,
Yeah.
and he was very we found him to be so there was a number of red flags that appeared to me,
Yeah.
and I'm not the only person who worked for Ferguson in that era who did not have a positive experience with him.
Oh
uh,
no, yeah, no. There was a lot of eggs broken to make that omelet, and I
yeah,
mean,
I'm
I'm
not
talking
gonna
about the omelet years is the years that I thought were fantastic. It took a while to get to that place, and unfortunately, the eggs cracked. It's the reality of life.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
just is.
I almost never would say anything like this, but and I'm going to speak from my experience, but like,
Yeah, yeah,
he was like very competitive. So like, for example, we were looking for his voice,
yeah,
the other thing is like when you get a late night show, when you're named the host of the late night show,
yep,
you as a professional, I would imagine that you're going to bring in people with you that have your back. Like,
sure,
so I'm just making this up, but John Mulaney is on this Netflix thing. He's going to bring in 5 or 6 of his people at least that he
yeah,
knows that he could trust that are going to help him form his voice.
yeah,
Ferguson didn't bring anybody in, literally nobody. So we were there trying to form his voice for him. And then we found that he would get very competitive in sketches. So I remember there's a super talented woman, I've lost touch with her, but her name is Lori Nasso. She used to work at SNL as a writer, and she was a comedic actress, and we would bring her on to be Craig's stalker, uh, who was to be this
mm,
comedic element where someone who's just like stalking Craig Ferguson everywhere he looked, and
yeah,
the whole idea is like she loved him, and she was constantly getting through security and asking him all these silly questions, and she would do well because she's like a very comedic actor. So the first time we did it, it killed. It was like gangbusters, and Craig did,
yep,
he did the sketch and it was great. The second time we did it, we noticed that Craig would like mess up. He lost a couple of lines, and Lori was trying to do her best to kind of like make the best of the taping part of
yeah,
it. And it would work okay, but it was like not as good as the first time. And then the third time we did it, Craig would like not, he would totally miss a bunch of cues. And we were
yeah,
like, this guy feeling competitive with Laurie because Laurie's getting laughs in
yeah,
service of him on the show. So like
yeah,
we started to realize that he would do that every once in a while. So this is terrible. I mean,
Are you kidding me? Like, how many of these people that we love had the wrinkles that needed to be kind of ironed out, especially at the beginning? You think about, and the way he got that job too. Like, I mean, the competitive. Well, it was kind of thrown into it. There's like 5 people, and then it went down to 2, like him and Michael Ian Black, and I mean, the way that he got that show was almost exactly what you're talking about. And again, Conan, his first few years, I mean, he handled it very, very well.
It was outwardly, very opposite of how Conan approached it, for sure.
I was going to say they all, the internal pressure must have been bonkers. But that being said, yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you got these massive, massive growing pains that everyone feels. It's not just the host that's feeling it. Everybody's feeling these growing pains. So
yeah, because if you're a writer in that show, you need to get stuff, when you're a writer in a show, you need to get stuff on the air, especially on a show like that, when you don't have a relationship with the host. You don't,
13-week commitments. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you have to get stuff on. And the other thing is, like, we were comedy writers who were forming comedy pieces. And one of the things that I used to enjoy a lot were creating desk pieces. And I created this desk piece called Craig's Newsstand Review, where we took a news, like if something big happened in the news and was on the cover of Time magazine, like the Pope is elected, we would see how other magazines covered it through their prism. So like how would Ebony cover, the Pope being elected, or how would, so we would just show different magazines giving their take. So it's like, Ebony's would be like, passed up another black guy again, and the next, whatever the next, High Times would be like, cool man, smoke, like we would just, it was a simple bit with 5 different art cards. And we were just trying to create for Craig Ferguson like a basic program that he can kind of do comedy bits in. So that's your job as a writer on a show like that. But then if you're going to encounter a host who thinks that you're trying to take his voice or overwhelm him, it's like that,
it's a trust thing. Like it's literally a trust thing.
Yeah, Kilborn never in a million years did that. Like, he was just like, he would, like I said back in the beginning, when talented people encounter other talented people, they enhance that talent, So that was my thing. And then when I got let go from that job, I Ferguson had said like stuff that wasn't necessarily cool, when someone leaves a job. And so anyway, I'd hate to put a damper on your love for him, but
no. Everything about, like, the fascination I have with the worldwide pants of the company of David Letterman and Company is it includes everything. It includes the ups, it includes the downs, it includes all of that stuff. And not everybody's going to be on the same page from a complimentary standpoint, but at the same time, the respect that you are speaking with here, it's, when you compare this to what some of the staffers have done in the treatment of, say, Ellen DeGeneres or Jimmy Fallon or things like that. Oh, let's go talk to Rolling Stone and let's go through. That's not what you're doing here. The respect that you have, Chris, is what you're saying is classy, but talking about times that were not the easiest times. And when you were there, I mean, it's pretty well documented that the transition, and Craig himself, when you look at what Craig Ferguson, the transition that he had to those golden years that I talk about, to me, the golden years were like right as Josh Robert Thompson is ascending. Well, that's a long time into the run. Before the gay skeleton robot even shows up, never mind, goes beyond a couple of canned phrases beyond, and talking to Josh, I had Josh on. Josh and I went 2.5 hours. It was something like that. Like, I mean, so the evolution, sometimes you're at the place where you got legs and a tail and it's not good, and it's and that's okay. But the way that you're talking about it is extremely respectful. So
we had to, like, it means so much to me to deal with people. Like, we had a lot of guest hosts come in and sit down and do like a few nights during that as we prepared for the transition from Kilborn to Ferguson. And like, we met people like Joe Buck. He was great, and we met people like Michael Ian Black, and Damien Fahey, of course, was like one of the best. And these people were like so easy to work with, and they got it, and they were cool. Like, I remember we did this thing with, I think it it was either Joe Buck or Michael Ian Black, where it was around Christmas time, and we were talking about dangerous toys to keep these away from your kids. You know how they always have those Consumer Report things, but these toys that we had were just super innocuous. So like the premise was like, he would bring out a globe and he'd be like, this is super dangerous. And people would be like, why? How's that dangerous? And he would like cut the globe open, and inside was just nothing but cocaine. It's like all globes are filled with cocaine, you know. And he got it, he did it, and he was cool. And I remember I did a bit, everybody was playing solitaire on their PCs back then.
Yeah.
And there were also like a slew of like poker shows. So we did a bit where Michael Ian Black was playing, he was debuting a new solitaire show. So we sat in his office and we made sure that the solitaire thing came up on his black glasses, and we filmed this intricate bit. And he was great, and so was Damien, and Damien did a bunch of stuff, and they were awesome. And all these other guys kind of came in and were cool. And I remember we pitched something to Craig Ferguson once where the show 24 was like a huge thing at the time.
Yep.
And we were like, look, this show is super exciting. You see the hours like 5 and 5 to 6 but some of it's pretty boring. And we cut to like the hour of 24 from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. It's just like somebody sleeping. Like, this guy needs his rest, So it's a dude in a bed, and he's like, I don't understand why this is it. Like, no, you don't understand. It's because he has to rest. Like nothing. I remember one time CBS at the time had CSI on the air, and people were complaining that CSI was shot too dark. Like literally, like it was like a story in the newspaper. It's like the filming of it was too dark for people.
Just underexposed kind of a thing. You're not seeing much.
So we were like, we sold these night vision goggles that you could watch CSI with. Like, just like, and Conan laid the groundwork for doing silly shit like that all the time. That that kind of influence. I was again, I wouldn't do this now, but I was so young. Like I was really trying to write for Conan in half the stuff I was pitching to Ferguson.
Yeah. That makes sense, actually, because again, where the show ended up, you talk about the pantomime horse. Like, I mean, every night he had a secretariat would show up at the like there is certainly some of that. I have 2 more questions for you. Sure. We could do this all day. I can't wait to do this more. As far as I'm concerned, I've gained a friend today. I can't wait to do whatever. I'm collecting as many of these friends as I possibly can, and I want to collaborate somehow. I love this
pontificating machine. So
yeah. Oh, this is great. This is so great. I can't wait for our next conversation, whatever that looks like. But I do have 2 other kind of prepared questions. The first one, and both of them may fall flat, but that's okay because I love the conversation. Chris, you've been so generous with your time today. But the first one has to do with, again, let's button up Ferguson here. Do you have any Peter Lasalle stories of any sort? Are there any Peter Lasalle stories that you might have? Even, I saw him walk walk past me, that kind of a thing. Peter obviously has a legacy, a unique, there's no other real way to say it that's going to give it any more majesty. It is a completely unique through line. Carson all the way down, the advisor, the very close advisor, David Letterman, and then of course moving over and running kind of pants west. Any Peter Lasalle stories of any sort?
Well, Peter Lasalle, when I was working there, was obviously he's very revered. In my tenure, which was like I want to say it was like close to 3 years over there, I didn't have a lot of interaction with him because he kind of had his own office, and he wasn't involved in when I was there in the day-to-day editorial as much. When Ferguson came in, he started to get more involved. Okay. So, I just saw him as a figure who was basically a walking TV legend. And, he always held himself, in the highest, poise. And, I wish I had I had a few exchanges with him that were polite, but never really like, anything crazily in depth. So
you and Peter Lasalle didn't go get drunk and go to whatever.
No,
who would have? With
dying to walk into his office and be like, "Hey, tell me some McMahon stories. How much of a drunk was Ed?"
Yeah, how did Johnny really feel when Carcinio was on the air? You know,
Yeah.
like that kind of, yeah,
Tell
absolutely.
me
I
the
mean, you want
Joan Rivers fallout,
there you
but
go. You want to pick
the
that brain. The last thing that I wanted to talk to you about is for
I mean, I can
me.
make something up here, but you
Oh, and maybe we will. Yeah, you know, the show's not over. No, I just appreciate that. Anytime I have the opportunity to talk about Peter, I do. And again, it's so, to me, the idea that you have a production company owning 2 hours of network television every night, like, it is just, it's unprecedented. It'll
yep,
probably never happen again,
probably won't.
unless a force that is so, a Kardashian force or something like that, it becomes, something that could save the industry or something. It just isn't going to happen again. Um, but the golden age for me, other than, the first late shift, was the second late shift in 2010. And to me, you're hearing everybody's involved now. All of the shows that were created because Dave kicked open that door are now weighing in on a nightly basis. The turmoil that is happening in late night, everybody's got a different place, including Ferguson, who kind of went the other way. He kind of went counterculture with everybody. He had Leno on his show, and he would, but then Conan, to somebody that we all have this love for and whatnot, and seeing how he was treated. I'm just curious where you were and what you were thinking during that time of 2010 when the Tonight Show and Conan's orbits got shuffled.
Well, I had been away from Conan for quite some time at
Yep.
that point.
Yep.
I still had friends there.
I bet you did. You probably had a lot of
Yeah,
friends who made the move from New York
yeah,
to LA, right? Were you living in
yeah.
LA at the time?
No, I moved to LA for Kilborn, and
Yeah.
then in Ferguson, and then I moved back to New York, and then I spent some time in LA like subsequently. I guess
Gotcha.
Conan was still working then because it was towards the end of Conan's thing. Anyway, I was just kind of like watching from afar, but
Yeah.
Conan, they my take on it is that Conan had there was a lot of decisions that were made that just I just feel like there were I feel this way very very strongly now, especially it's like when you get involved in the business model of television,
Yep.
at least for a while was when you brought a network was invested in the show becoming successful because they were putting out the money, and then everybody was like geared up to get to a goal, have a goal of whether it was like syndication or just like stability or whatever.
Hmm.
Everybody was kind of like invested in the show being successful. But I
Hmm.
feel like today the model is different. Like when you go, you don't benefit necessarily from selling a show to Netflix that becomes a huge hit because you're not getting your finances are not growing. You're getting one kind of fee for it. So like,
Ah,
the Seinfelds of the universe, the Cheers, those things, they were paid for uh, a certain amount of money, and then when a show gets increasingly popular, they charge more for the commercials. So like for a
right.
hit show, you're getting more money than for a show that's not a hit. So the network is invested in, for a certain amount of time at least, in growing the show to its maximum capacity of viewership.
Right.
That model doesn't exist anymore. So like when that happened with the Tonight Show, looking back on, I'm like, well, how come? Where was that part of it, in Conan's equation? Like, where was okay, here's Conan, he's our guy. We're launching this thing with a lot. And then, but how come, when the ratings or whatever the financial decision was made, how
Yep.
come there wasn't that like, okay, we're going to increase, we're gonna try to maximize this. It was kind of like, oh, we're gonna bring this guy back. So, I felt it was like it was a disappointment, and it
Hmm.
was like kind of a change from that traditional way. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, this is why I asked
Trying to
you. I
look
knew
at it
you would.
from like a
Yeah,
30,000 foot
I
angle.
was gonna say, the reason I asked you this is because you were removed from it, but these are people that you did know that did make the trek over, and lives that were uprooted and moved, and that was actually the perspective that I thought you might bring to it. But the 30,000, the macro of it, is also like, I knew you'd have a unique perspective on it, and that's why I was asking about it. because at the end of the day, and also the late night lore and history of things that we love so much as a genre, as a show too. But Letterman not getting the Tonight Show led to something that was unprecedented and awesome, and that is him creating the organization that actually competed with the Tonight Show for the very first time in history. And not only that, his own legacy in Late Show, the idea of the 2-hour block that we were talking about, all that crap. Unprecedented and amazing, and it wouldn't have happened had he gotten the Tonight Show. Conan, same deal. Because of what happened to him, it was a different thing. It wasn't just, did I get the show, did I not get it? He actually got it, and then got it taken away from him. But now you look at what the mobilization of Team Coco during that time.
People forget about that.
Every year I watch the documentary, the Conan O'Brien Can't Stop documentary. It's fantastic about him doing the live shows during the time where he was prohibited from being on television. And now you look at what the serious deal that he just signed, and his travel show is amazing. And I loved his TBS show because the TBS show felt like Late Show, whereas he got to do anything he wanted with no constraints whatsoever. And I love that feeling. Ferguson had a similar feeling too, with CBS doesn't give a shit what we're doing. We're going to do whatever we want, that kind of a thing. And wouldn't have happened if he would have just kept the Tonight Show.
That's interesting.
So to me, these are all fascinating things. And it's part of the ascent, I think, of these titans that we love so much and love being a part of, and even nostalgically talking about to this day. Part of these titans that we love so much is how they dealt with the adversity that hits them, and when everything goes left, how they go right, and what they do, and how different it is when they go in that direction. I thought you would have an interesting perspective on this. Chris, you have been extremely generous with your time. I'm so grateful for this. I'm going to do a real quick commercial. And you can either add to it, or you can just, kind of clap for it. We have one sponsor only at the Letterman Podcast, and that is hello-deli.com. Now, Rupert G does not own the Hello Deli anymore. It's a year. It's been almost, at the time of this taping, it's exactly 1 year since I was at New York, and we had Worldwide Pants had the event for Rupert. You could watch it on the Letterman YouTube channel. It's like a 38-minute video. I actually got to speak at that event. I can't believe it. Rupert sold the deli.
Well, he had to cash out eventually.
He did. And I mean, gosh, I'm so happy for him. And I just talked to him this last week. He's doing great. But he still has hello-deli.com. Hello-deli.com, the only place for official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, Late Show hats and mugs and shirts and all that kind of crap. Go to hello-deli.com. Rupert G himself is still running that thing. So if it's throwback stuff, it's almost 10 years now. If you want any Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, go to hello-deli.com. Rupert will send the order with love. Did you ever go to the Hello Deli?
Of course. I mean, when I worked at NBC and David left, there was still a closet there filled with some of the stuff that Dave would give to celebrity guests, and I tried to find it. Oh, we never got to by
show and tell
here.
Yeah. What is that? No. What is that?
This is a Comedy Classics stamp that came from Letterman that was in my office at Conan for many years. Basically, if you stamp and you put this down, it says Comedy Classics here.
That's fantastic.
That I stole on my way out from
Good boy.
Conan.
Good boy.
I used to get those. So if you go to the Rupert G thing, I'm sure he probably has the sponges. So that has the late night insignia on it.
Those sponges are way out of print now, my friend. You have one of those? You got one of those?
And then the cup, the collapsible cup, of course, is another classic. So I'm sure, you could hit Rupert G's hello-deli.com or whatever it is, and get your fill of those amazing pieces of memorabilia.
Oh my gosh, man. Imagine if Rupert sold sponges. It would be a new lease on life on the hello-deli.com mythos as well. Chris, thank you so much for all your contributions. And I say this, earnestly. You are a piece of the puzzle of this thing that we all love so much. Again, you were a page at SNL. That there are those of us around the world that look at that and go, "Oh my gosh, you're one of those people. You're one of those guys." And
I got dinner for some of the best.
Your lineage within the entertainment world and the writing world. Thank you for your contribution so far. And again, I cannot endorse Talking Trump, the American Emperor Aftershow enough. It is genius. I hope you have something here that really, really, really bubbles up and does something, and not just like a like a pasta bowl that bowls over. I hope it's like Pop Rocks. I hope some things pop and have some really, really cool
Thank you.
Experiences because of this thing. It's a genius premise, and I hope a lot of people attach to it very, very quickly. And thank you for life gives you you get chicken shit, you turn it into chicken salad if you can, and I think that's what you're doing with this thing. So thank you very much for still throwing out amazing content for us these days. Thank you for taking your creative talent and giving it to all of us. And thank you for being a guest on the Letterman podcast today, Chris.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and best of luck in the future. And thank you for literally listening to me as a captive audience tell stories like a babbling idiot for the last 90 minutes.
That's what we do. I'm going to do a quick outro. We'll say our goodbye privately. That's exactly what we do. And the longer the better, as far as I'm concerned. I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff and kicking it around with the people who were there, the people who were a part of it, the people who enjoyed it the way that I and the dozens of folks who have taken the Letterman podcast and made it part of their viewing or rituals. I'm so grateful for that. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.